I think as we wait for others to join in, we can begin. And I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Damaris Choti. I work with the African Studies Center here at Michigan State University as coordinator of student and alumni programs. And I also help facilitate the African Tea Time events. And these are our bi-weekly signature events held every fall and spring semesters to share knowledge about Africa on different topics related to the continent. And this would be political, socioeconomic, cultural, education, very diverse topics. And those who have had a chance to view our YouTube recordings will have a view of that and see the variety of presentations that we have here. So today is our very first one this semester or even this year, and we're very privileged and honored to have Chibuzor here today, who is going to be our speaker. And he's going to speak on a work that he has done, a project that is very inspiring to me, and I believe to everybody that is going to be listening to this today or later, the recording. And it's going to be a book reading event that is featuring his book, Rising at Sunrise. Very interesting, a youth engagement book on soft skill development, highlighting 55 inspiring real life stories of individuals of African descent in 26 countries. So Chibuzor is here today, and what we do at Tea Time Chibuzor, we don't introduce the speakers elaborately. We give them time to speak about themselves, even more than we have on the record. I think even for the few minutes that I've chatted with you, I've learned a little quite more about yourself. So at tea time, we begin by allowing our speakers to give themselves an introduction, and then who you are, what you do, and then dive into the presentation. So thank you everybody for joining us. And you're welcome. Chibuzor will do the presentation. When he's done, then we can have time to engage with him after. And if you have a question or a comment, you can also feel free to add that on the chat. So welcome, Chibuzor, and introduce yourself and continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Damaris Choti. Thank you so much. Without you, this would not be possible. So I want to thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Chibuzor Agomuoh. I am a youth development professional. I'm the founder of a youth development organization known as the Sunrise Youth Intervention Organization. It was founded in 2011, and the goal is to equip young persons with resources in soft skills and vocational skills to enable them make proper life choices for productive living. And I've been doing that for 11 years. Currently, I'm a specialist with IREX on the Community Engagement Exchange Program. And I'm currently in Detroit, working with IREX to support fellows from about 80 countries around the world. So I'm here because of the book, Rising at Sunrise. And I think, let me raise it high. I'll be at MSU next week. Sadly, I was thinking I would come with about 100 copies, but I couldn't. I came with, I think, about 60, 70 copies. And right here at this hotel, they've bought most of them. And I have, I think, about 20 to come with at MSU. And I'm glad about the acceptance the book is having, because that was exactly what we envisioned. And I was saying earlier on, I wouldn't have done this without the huge support of the 55 contributors, of which Dr. Anita Benson is one of them. And I'll be talking about how I started writing the book and what actually inspired me to put the book together. So that's basically it. The main reason why I decided to put this book together was, I remember growing up, there was a particular phase in my life I experienced a challenge, and I felt a bit lonely because it was as though I didn't have anyone who really understood my experience at the time. And being an avid reader when I was a child, I read so much. I desired to have a book that had a compilation of real life stories that I could relate to. So it's been a long dream for me, putting a book like this together. And I would say the pandemic, the COVID pandemic and the lockdown really gave me that push to sit down, reflect and introspect, and to create something like this. So I started gathering materials and I started thinking and coming up with ideas to put this book together. And then January 2021, I decided to give it a push and said, hey, I think I should take it seriously. So Doctor, you had asked me, how did I select, what's my rubric to select the contributors? So here was what I was looking at. I was looking at people with very, very powerful stories that young persons could relate to, genuine stories that young persons could connect to. And some of them, I met them in the course of growing up, some of them through fellowship programs, one of which is the Mandela Washington Fellowship, of which I met Dr. Anita. Some of them were people I met in the course of my project, traveling from country to country, implementing projects. And then some of them were recommended to me by some persons like, hey, I think you need to speak with this person. He has a very, very interesting story. She has a very interesting story. And then aside that, using that alone, I would have a very long list. Initially, I thought I was going to get 100 stories, but then I didn't want to write a dictionary. I wanted a simple book. So along the line, I decided to stream it down to 55. And there were certain things I was looking for. I was looking for people whose stories, like I said earlier on, could resonate with young people, and whose work also has a lot to do with young people. So because at the back of my mind, I knew that some way, somehow, someone who would read their story would tell themselves, I think I need to connect with this person, and then possibly get mentored or get further inspired by their story and by their life. So I took my time and I made a list and I emailed all of them, telling them what I was about and why I wanted to go on this project. And most of them obliged. I would say maybe one or two refused to go further because they felt that they were still on their journey and it would be insincere of them to pretend as though they have it all together. And I respected that honesty. One of them, his story, he's from Liberia. His story was quite deep that I think it triggered him. And at some point he had to pause because for a few of them agreed to submit their stories, but I preferred interviewing them. So most of them, I interviewed them. I choose to interview them because I felt I would be able to capture the nuances around their stories. And yeah, there were three basic things I wanted. I wanted them to answer the question. The first question was, I wanted them to share with me that particular moment in their life that would have altered the journey of their life if they had not made a very wise decision. And then the second question I asked them was, what exactly was that decision they made that changed the trajectory of their lives for good? And then the third question I had to ask them was, what life lesson did they gain from that experience? And what would they want the young person reading their story to take home with? So that was the style I used, and I was able to, hear from them. It was a learning experience for me as well, listening to them and gathering their stories. So when I gathered their stories, I already had at the back of my mind what I wanted to write about. And so I had at the back of my mind that I was going to write a book of 10 chapters. And the chapters would be positive self-concept, effective communication, resilience, adaptability, empathy. And it's interesting how I structured the chapters because I had to structure it in such a way that the young persons who would be reading it will find it appealing, because if I just say positive self-concept, it would sound boring. So I coined it to be the passport of positive self-concept. And then chapter 2, the currency of effective communication. And then chapter 3, the boots of resilience. Chapter 4, the umbrella of adaptability. And chapter 5, the clothing of empathy. The crown of high order thinking is chapter 6. The belt of collaboration is chapter 7. The helmet of entrepreneurial thinking is chapter 8. Chapter 9 is the spectacle of inclusiveness. And no, not the spectacle of inclusiveness, the spectacle of interdisciplinarity. And then chapter 10 is the accessory of inclusiveness. So that was how I coined it. And I made sure that the stories, I was able to select stories that aligned with each chapter, so that the young persons would read the text and then read the stories. So that was how the book was created.
Sorry, I was saying thank you so much for that brief. That's very helpful. I have tons of questions to ask because I love stories. They're very powerful. They speak to me in a special way. So thank you for that. So you can continue.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to read the introduction. By the way, the book is currently on Amazon. So those who might need copies could check it out on Amazon. So one of the favorite parts of this book, someone told me, I did a book tour in Nigeria to Port Harcourt, Lagos, Abuja, Ibadan, and Calabar. So someone said something very important. She said she read the introduction and she was like, wow, this is my favorite part, until she now read the stories. And each chapter, as she keeps reading the stories, she doesn't know which part of the book is her favorite. So I'm going to read the introduction, which explains what the book is about. So it says, it's morning. Imagine the sun as a giant spotlight, beaming this message to everyone. The stage is yours. It's time for you to act your script. We all have one day to live. In actuality, one life to live. Your sunrise is the moment of your youth. It's a period of awakening to the abundance of sunlight presented to you as opportunities. Your energy is at its peak at sunrise, but you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is to arise from your comfort zone and accomplish great things to give your life a meaning. When your day is spent and no meaningful activity has been done, you'll be left with nothing but profound regret. At sunset, when you evaluate your life and recall the missed opportunities, you'll wonder, what exactly have I done with my life? Rising at Sunrise is a book written with young Africans in mind. It's an eclectic ensemble of deeply compelling personal stories and life lessons by 55 inspiring individuals of African descent, resident in 26 countries. It also shares empirically proven theories to enable you move from where you are to where you ought to be. An Igbo adage says, "Mgbe onye tetara bụ ụtụtụ ya," which is classically interpreted to mean the moment of one's awakening is his morning. To rise at sunrise means to dress up in readiness to surmount life's challenges. This book provides an excellent resource for young Africans seeking to succeed in their various endeavors. The theories tell us how to accomplish success. The stories show us that it's possible and inspire us to go for it. The personal narrations in these pages reveal the strength of young Africans in the face of various challenges. These outstanding individuals have risen boldly out of the ashes of yesterday to create a better life for themselves and those around them. Through these inspiring stories, young persons will draw strength to overcome their negative past. They will gain insight to understand and navigate their present and courage to chart the course of their future towards excellence and greatness. The sun is rising, a new day is dawning, and there is an awakening happening. Will you stay asleep? So that's the introduction of the book. So are there more things you would like me to talk about? Perhaps let me go to chapter 1. We have, I don't know if Dr. Anita is still here.
Yeah.
Okay,
James.
so like I was saying before we started, that someone during lunch yesterday told me that her story resonated with him, because colorism is a thing in Africa. We're already faced with racism. And then the sad thing is that we ourselves, as Africans, also fight ourselves and marginalize ourselves using colorism. So I'm going to read Dr. Anita's story, and then, which is found in chapter 1. And then maybe she would have something to say. Dr. Anita, interestingly, is a dermatologist, and she's doing incredible work, encouraging young persons to embrace melanin, embrace their dark skin, because dark skin is beautiful. So I'm going to read her story. When I was 12 years old, I prayed fervently to God to make my skin, to make me light-skinned. I was tired of being the darkest child in the neighborhood. I was tired of being called derogatory names and constantly being compared to my lighter-skinned siblings and friends. I knew my mother would never let me lighten my skin. She thought I was a beautiful child and never seemed to hear the banter in the market, which said, "Madam, this is your child black, oh." That's how Nigerians would talk, you know. She told me I was beautiful many times, but of course, I didn't believe her. There was colorism in my neighborhood and school, and if I had allowed it, it would have cost me low self-esteem. It may have made me so insecure that I would listen to the market women whose stalls I passed by every day. You see, they told me that they sold magic in a bottle, bleaching agents that would change my life and give me beauty and acceptance. Colorism isn't racism. It's a word used to describe what people you love do to you, which makes you feel inferior because your skin tone is darker. It's harm inflicted on your self-worth by people of your own tribe and community. Instead of chasing an illusion by trying to erase my dark skin, I learned to treat people with respect and to be kind to everyone. I read books, tons of them, and became the intelligent woman that everyone was in awe of. The joy I had as the peace within me grew became so contagious that my beauty shone through. Literally, overnight, I was hailed by the sobriquets: Black Beauty, Melanin Queen, Black and Shiny. Self-acceptance is such an attractive trait, you see. Several years after I became a medical doctor, I met a girl who could have been me. She had decided to bleach her skin and ended up laying in a morgue because her kidneys had been poisoned. I saw girls with stretch marks and skin infections girls with skin so thin and discolored like roasted plantain. All these were adverse effects of choosing the magic in a bottle. My heart ached for them, and a fire burned in my soul. I had found purpose. I would not rest till colorism was laid to rest. Dear teenage girl or boy reading this, you are not too black. Your black is the right amount of melanin, of beautiful melanin. There's no magic in a bottle of bleaching cream, just future tears. Black is so beautiful. Don't let myopic people stuck in the throes of mental slavery and riding on the echoes of racism tell you anything different. Refuse to accept the discrimination against your beautiful chocolate skin. Bloom where you are planted. One day you will find purpose and see the beauty by design in the skin you have been given. Healthy skin glows. Lighter skin is not better. Refuse the urge to conform. Bask in your authenticity. You are beautiful and enough.
Wow. That's the entire story?
That's the story.
And that's how short those stories are?
That's how yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful work. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to have my copy for sure.
So Dr. Anita is here. I think she would like to say a thing or two regarding this. You know, chapter 1 begins with an opening statement, which is so important. The opening statement is a quote by Lucille Ball. Chapter 1, of course, is the passport of positive self-concept. And it says, love yourself first, and everything else falls into line. You really have to love yourself to get anything done in this world. So Dr. Anita's story sums it up.
Wow, that's just amazing. I think Dr. Anita wants to say something.
Okay, thanks for reading my story, Chibuzor. When I think this is the first time I'm hearing somebody else read the story. Every time I read it, it was in my voice because I wrote the story. So it was, thank you for that. It was an experience, like, okay, so yes, thank you for that. And, writing the book, I had actually submitted another story to Chibuzor. And then one night he sent me a message, and he was like, you know what, we're going into publishing soon, and I want you to read through your story and see if, you want to edit it or add something to it. And, and I don't know, I just got this inspiration. Like I was typing in my notepad on my phone, lying on the bed. It was really late, maybe like 2 a.m. And I realized that this was a more personal story for me to tell, as opposed to the one I had given him before. The one I'd given him before was personal, no doubt, but it didn't resonate with me as deeply as this one did. So, I wrote it out and I sent it to him and I was like, okay, there goes. And he loved it. And he was like, well, the rest is history. So being a dermatologist, I realized that, this is a problem for a lot of people of color. It's not even an African problem anymore. Like in the course of running my NGO, I've spoken to people who are not even Black, but just happen to be the darkest in their family. So like, I'd speak to Caucasians and they'll tell me that, my sister was light-skinned and blonde and I was the dark head, and the family treated her like she was more delicate than I was. Like, she should be waited on. So it's something that's really deeply encroached into a lot of things. And when I was doing some research, I found out that, that even from centuries ago, like queens and all of these people would soak themselves in goat's milk or use powders just to appear lighter because, some people even make it date as far back as the Bible and saying things like, every time they depict a picture of God, they make him white and then the devil is Black. And, unconsciously, we have all these images in our head that white is right and black is not. So growing up really dark, and then, being, having the opportunity to leave Africa and realizing that I'm now a visible minority. I was telling someone the other day that it's one thing to be a minority, it's another thing to be a visible minority, meaning that you can't even hide. Your black is the first thing that anybody will see where you go. So the pressure to fit in is very great for a lot of people, especially younger people, because there's a lot of peer pressure. They're just trying to figure out themselves and all of that. So I wanted to put this out there to let them know that, look, it's not all roses. Like, all the ads we see on social media, nobody tells you when the people's skin start falling apart and they start getting, it's we doctors who get to see those people, because they just start looking for a dermatologist, and then we now have to try and salvage and everything. But they don't tell people. Most people who are on social media using filters, looking all perfect and looking lighter and brighter, are probably on, they're probably seeing a doctor often and nobody knows about it. So I was like, okay, we need to protect the next generation. They need to know that if they're nobody's saying don't lighten your skin. That's like going into a conversation about getting a boob job or some plastic surgery. It's a personal choice, but it needs to be an informed decision. People need to know what they're signing up for. They need to know that this is not a no risks, all rewards. Do you understand? You could get into trouble. Your skin could potentially break down. You could have irreversible side effects. If you don't care, if you want to damn all the consequences, then no problem. But I'm meeting so many people who don't know the consequences and they're going into that. So they start up with colorism, then they start bleaching, then they get adverse effects, then society shuns them and, stigmatizes them. Then they have low self-esteem, which was like the low self-esteem they had in the beginning, but only worse this time because now nothing can be done. Their skin is destroyed. And the same people who told them to bleach are laughing at them because their skin is, looking awful. So I feel like a lot of people need to know that because, we live in a world where image is everything. So we need to change the narrative. Thank you.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Anita, for that wonderful addition to the reading. And thank you for sharing your story,
Thank you.
because I know Chibuzor was not going to have this compilation if it's not people like you who felt compelled to share stories like these that are educative, that enable others, younger people, and even older people to just see the effects of the world that we're living in, the pressures and all those things. And that's just story number one. We have 50 more stories to go.
Yeah.
And what's amazing about listening to this story, this first story, is that it's not actually just about, it speaks to self-urgency, like self-esteem. But that's not just it. There are so many more other lessons that can be drawn from this book or learnings, because we're looking now into issues of diversity and inclusion already from that one story. It can be a conversation starter, just that particular one, because there's so much to discuss in everybody's life. And I just want to give an example. I have two daughters now. Let me start the conversation like that. One is 16, another is 13. And this 16-year-old one is outspoken. Like when it comes to things to do with injustice, she's just the person she is. She will find a way to speak out, at least within her age. So they had this it's called a walkout at school. It's about an incident that happened that had to do with racism. And one thing that I learned from her, and I keep insisting on that, in giving a speech, because they were called upon, the students, the student leaders, of course, were up front, and then they called upon the audience, anyone from the audience, to say something about, it was a group of kids were playing sports in another school institution, and then some of the opponents, like in that school where they were playing, were throwing like racial slurs and, that type of words to the players. As you know, most of the time, especially in the US, when it comes to football, most of the players are black. most of them, like from the African descent individuals. So somehow it became an issue, story short. So then my daughter comes up, because I know that I wasn't there. It was in the news. I just came to learn about it in the news, and of course she shared this with us. And makes one very important point. And she says, I wonder how, as a people, I'm paraphrasing it, we can come this far technologically, we can advance in so many ways, but fail to understand that things to do with color, race, is things that we can't change. We can change everything pretty much using using our minds, using our intelligence, but there's nothing we can change about who we are. I can't change being me. So why do we dwell on discussing these things, fighting about these things that we cannot change? Oh my, that just spoke to me so much. Of course, it's not that I don't know, but it triggered me to think that, yes, this is my skin color. I can't change it unless, as Anita shared, I manipulate it in the wrong ways. But I can't change my skin color. I can't change the race that I belong to. I can't change things that I'm born with, my traits. I can't.
And there is nothing wrong with it.
And there's nothing wrong with it. So why should it be an issue that Chibuzor is dark as Chibuzor is the person he is? We need the diversity in the world. We can't be the same. We can't be one person. We can't be everybody. Why don't we appreciate that we are who we are, and that's how we're meant to be? So, I mean, see, I'm going on and on and on, and wow, as I said, I can't wait to read the book. I can't wait for my copy. So thank you so much. And I don't know if other people, I mean, because this is an open discussion, I don't know if anyone has something to comment and say before we can ask Chibuzor to tell us what the next movie is, perhaps another story. He will tell us, but it's open. If you want to say something or comment, ask a question, you can unmute yourself. You're welcome to.
Omeza has something to say.
Oh. Yes, I do. I could even put a video. Okay. So I think, Chibuzor, thank you very much for your work. I would like to get a copy too at some point. I'll check for it. Yes, I think it's a good topic. It's a good story that Dr. Anita had put forward. But one of the things I'm really hoping would happen maybe in the next several years is things like colorism and the self-esteem issues. I think these are things that should start from home, because I think if kids are already teenagers and they already feel a certain way about themselves, it will almost be impossible to try to redirect their mindsets. So if they're raised in the set, I think nurture plays a very big role with disregard quite often. So I think not until that is addressed, not until, I think if there was some kind of past where you have to go through the past to see if you're qualified to be a parent. I think if that was the case, that would have been really great, because if the kids grow up with some kind of feeling some kind of way, maybe because of pressure from society or whoever, it will be very tough to. So sometimes it might be easy to say, why do people go as far as altering their skin or doing all sorts of things? But I think the work starts from home.
That's right.
If they were raised in some kind of system where, for home especially, where they feel highly about themselves, then it makes it a little bit more difficult for someone to tell them otherwise. That's what I believe. Yeah.
Wow, I mean, I'll jump in a little bit, and thank you so much, Omeza.
Yes.
You say Omeza?
Yes.
Omeza, thank you so much. You know why, and this is also speaking to my work, my dissertation work. I studied women principals, successful women principals in Kenya, of course. And one of my conclusions is how home is the place where self-esteem, nurturing of self-esteem begins. Honestly, like that's part of my conclusion, that it has to, I mean, it's not just home, but that's the base. Because if within the families where you get back to, let's say there's pressures outside, there's stress outside, home is the place where you feel comfortable being. And even when you go out there, step out of the house knowing that my mom, my dad, my sisters love me for who I am, then who are you? And that's actually, in these stories, that's what happened to the women leaders that I wrote their biographies about. It's a biographical study as well. That's why I love stories, as I was telling Chibuzor. My conclusion, part of their story is that just one big theme that came out of that is that home is the place to begin. Fathers, mothers, it's right. Because of the encouragement, it's just because of telling them, we love you and you can do it. Nobody should tell you otherwise. That's how they succeeded to become school principals. And women who are 65, let's say 60s, 50s now, they grew up during tough times when education was not for everybody unless you have a strong background. So I definitely agree with you, Omeza, on that. It's a great point that you raise. It needs to start from home.
Thank you.
It needs to start from home. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a story in the book in chapter 1 that connects to that, but I'm not going to read it. It's a story of a woman, she's from Ghana, whose self-esteem was crushed by her father. Thank God for her mom who came to the rescue. I mean, can you imagine coming home from school? You were first in class, like you took first position in class and you were excited and you felt, oh, I'm so excited to tell my dad the news. And you got to meet with your dad, presented your report card, and he looks at it and then he turns to you and says, it looks like there are no intelligent persons in your class. And he says this to her when she was a girl. And children remember things like that, whether they are 5 or 6 or 7. And she said it crushed her. And thank God for her mom who stepped in to build her self-esteem. So her story is in chapter 1. I'm not going to read it, but it's also another incredible story. I'm going to go to chapter 3. I would leave chapter 2. There are interesting stories in chapter 2. But I'm not going to go to chapter 2 because of time. I'll jump to chapter 3. Chapter 3 says the boots of resilience. And the reason why I wrote this chapter is because young persons find it easy to give up because they feel like, oh, life is easy. Having been raised by their parents, your parents pay fees for you, they provide food, they provide shelter. And then you are 18, 19, 20, and you are beginning to gain a level of independence. And you are beginning to have an experience and a bite of what life is like. And challenges hit you here, hit you there, and then you begin to feel, I think I should give up. So having worked with youths for many years, I see this as a problem amongst many of them. And that's why I decided to write this chapter. And I'm just going to read the opening paragraph, and then I'm going to read a short section of the book that really speaks to me. So it begins by saying, there will be moments when it feels like your efforts have been in vain. You may feel that you've lost progress and that instead of advancing, you are actually regressing. Your feet may hurt as you journey through life's concrete hallway. What do you do when you don't know what else to do? I'll tell you what to do. You put on your resilience boots. And then it goes down to say a number of things to them. And then I jump to this other part that says, overcoming the pain of rejection. Because young people need to know that rejection is going to happen to them. It happens to every one of us, and no one can escape it. The question is, what do you do when it happens to you? So it says, people who seek to do great things will at some point or the other be rejected. The painful blow of rejection seems to get even the great staggering. It's a major contributor to the mental health crisis experienced by many today. Nobody likes being rejected. We want to be accepted by everyone in every place. But the truth is that won't always be the case. Rejection seeks to isolate and possibly silence you. You may not feel like a failure, but success means little when you are isolated. Many times, rejection is a projection of someone's personal fears and insecurities onto another person. Stop viewing rejection as a negative, humiliating force and start viewing it as a necessary development tool and catalyst for success. Rejection is not a message denying your worthiness or greatness. It's a signal that the door to your greatness may be located in some other place. See rejection as protection from something or someone that isn't meant to be in your life. If someone doesn't want you in their life, it means you will never be your best if you stay with them. Don't force it. When the door on your left refuses to open, it could be a time to turn to the right. You will eventually get to your ultimate destination, because actually the goal is the destination, the vision you have, what you aim to accomplish. In the face of rejection, resilience empowers you to reframe the situation and pivot. It's a smart response that proclaims, I won't say no to myself just because you didn't say yes to me. So I'm going to end with that part. But there's a story I'm going to read from chapter 3 that is very funny and very interesting. It's from Robson Mamba from Zambia. And I mean, every time I've had a book reading and we read this story, people usually laugh. And then they would feel like, what in the world? So here's his story. He said, I'll never forget January 1998. I was to start my junior secondary education at Kafue Boys Secondary School. Unfortunately, the exact day I was programmed to begin was the day my younger brother died. It was totally unexpected, as he hadn't been ill. All the money that had been raised for my school fees by my father, a farm laborer, went towards the funeral expenses. During the funeral, two of my uncles visited us. One was a professional accountant, and the other was a general worker in a car showroom. The former, being the professional accountant, embraced me and comforted me for the loss and devastation that had befallen me. Furthermore, he donated his oversized shoes to me. His wife handed me a double bed sheet, which I cut into half for use at the boarding school. The letter, however, spat hate-filled words in my face. He declared that he knew my parents wouldn't be able to send me to school. He told me that if I ever reached the 12th grade, I should cut his forefinger. Can you imagine? So he goes further to say, in a quest to prove my uncle wrong, I worked extremely hard to surmount all odds. Little did he realize that his negative energy towards me was the fuel that would propel me to the top. By God's grace, he lived until I was in university, and we buried him with all his fingers intact. Yeah, because he had said that he had said, oh, you are not going to get to the 12th grade. If you get to the 12th grade, cut off my finger. Interestingly, he got to university. So he said, I thank God for my uncle who challenged me to cut his forefinger if I ever attained grade 12. Every time that thought came to mind, it was an impetus to push harder. Today, I look back with a big smile and wish he had lived a little longer to see how his words motivated me. So that's the end of that particular story. And that story is very interesting because To another person, it would be an opportunity to hold resentment and bitterness and unforgiveness. But then someone took something like that and made it feel to drive his life forward and made something big out of his life. So that's one very powerful and interesting story. Another part of the book that I would love to talk about is chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the clothing of empathy. The clothing of empathy. And it opens with an interesting quote, which says, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care," by President Theodore Roosevelt. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And there is an interesting part in this chapter I would like to read to us. So it's page 96. So it says, empathy is feeling with people. It's a choice, a vulnerable choice. This is because in order to connect with another person, you have to connect with something in yourself that knows that feeling. Before I go further, let me speak about why I included this chapter. I included this chapter because young persons need to adopt empathy as a soft skill. And the relevance of this skill cannot be overflowed. Because when we learn to see things from other people's perspective, and when we learn to feel what other people are feeling, the idea of discriminating people, the idea of subjugating and marginalizing people will not be there, because we'll put ourselves in their shoes. And I feel very strongly that the workplace will be a lot better when empathy is practiced, and our society will be a lot better. So I go further to read. It says here, when you pay more attention to the other person and put yourself in their shoes, you are practicing empathy. Empathy is the most important communication skill a person can have at work or in life. By putting yourself in the other person's place, you get a sense of how they are feeling. When you show empathy for another person, you are treating them like a human being. It shows you are concerned about them and can relate to a fellow human in distress. I want to stress the difference between empathy and sympathy. To help you further understand that, the two are not synonymous. Sympathy says, I understand. Empathy says, I feel your pain. A significant portion of this chapter is gotten from the book of a famous author, Brené Brown. She wrote the book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. So from her book, she explains about the difference between empathy and sympathy, and that they are not the same thing. Empathy is about feeling, and sympathy is just about, she used the analogy of someone standing over a pit and looking at one who has fallen into the pit and saying, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. And she said there's a difference between that and going into the pit, meeting with the person in that pit, and helping to see how you can bring them out of that pit. So I jump to the next paragraph before I read a story. It says, empathy enables you make informed decisions about others by being patient enough to absorb ample factual and observational data before coming to a conclusion. Empathy does not stop you from carrying out disciplinary action when needed. You are able to patiently analyze the situation, put yourself in the other person's shoes, and make a well-founded decision. 30 years down the road, you will be able to look back at your decision and still say, I did the right thing. But then also, there is a part of the book I try to present as a caveat regarding empathy. It's an interesting chapter with a number of pages. But then here is the part in the book I like to point out to people. It says, empathy gives us insight into the complexities of human nature. Moreover, it allows us to engage properly with those complexities, even when they are not in any way similar to our lived experience. With empathy, we are both blessed and burdened with the responsibility of tolerance. An ability to see the world through a different set of lens can further, okay, let me read it again. An inability to see the world through a different set of lens can further stifle one's ability to build healthy relationships. We must recognize that human beings are multidimensional. Thus, we shouldn't tackle social situations with a one-dimensional approach. Empathy invites us to bear in mind the varied viewpoints held by different people in different situations. Having said all that, I want you to understand that empathy is not about people pleasing. Being kind does not mean letting people use you. It takes a healthy level of emotional intelligence to tell when an action is a mistake and when someone is purposefully crossing the line. You need to learn to be comfortable with setting healthy boundaries in your life. If you fail to set boundaries, you are inviting people to ignore your needs while you stay busy catering to theirs. It's okay to express displeasure when you feel underappreciated. You don't have to be vociferous about it. You can express your observations gracefully but firmly. What a lot of people do is to cower in humility outwardly, but stew in resentment and disappointment inwardly. Allowing such feelings of disappointment fester could turn your heart into a repository of anger, anxiety, and offense. You need to teach people to treat you as one deserving of respect. Remember, how can you love others when you cannot love yourself? And so it ends with an African proverb which says, kindness is a language which the blind can see and the deaf can hear. So that's the end of the text for chapter 5. There are interesting stories. For the sake of time, I may not go into them, but interesting stories on a lady with endometriosis who discovered that she had the symptoms at 17, but didn't go for early diagnosis until later, I think in her early 20s, and then it became really severe. But understanding what it was to have that condition, she was able to help dozens of other women with endometriosis to get early treatment and to prevent getting to late stage condition. And then we have Angora Man, we have Jean-Claude Muhiri from Rwanda, who was an orphan, and understanding what it is to live without parents, was able to support over 200 young persons, orphans, and ensure that they went through school. So chapter 5 is a very, very interesting chapter with some very heart-touching stories. You know, it will be really, really fun to read. So Dr. Choti, I don't know if you have anything to ask regarding chapter 5. Your mic is not on. Yeah.
Sorry, I was saying, remind me the title of chapter 5 again.
Yes, it's The Clothing of Empathy.
Oh, okay.
The Clothing of Empathy.
No, it's not a question. Like, I don't have a question to ask. It's only that the inspiration I'm drawing from your book in regard to people genuinely putting their experiences out there for others to learn from first, and also to be energized from. because sometimes you think or feel that you are alone. Or you feel ashamed of your experiences. You think, oh, this is not something that I can share. I can't share my feeling. I can't make myself vulnerable. But I mean, the more you read, the more you elaborate on these stories, it just makes me feel like there are so many different ways that we can contribute to society. Sometimes we think that for younger people, when you talk about empowering younger people, it's about giving them like skills, tangible skills that they can use to either become entrepreneurs and things like that. We forget that our stories, what our experiences can be very powerful as well. Like a story like that there are so many ways that a younger person can use it to propel themselves to their destination. So I'm honestly feel that I'm honored to have had you be part of this discussion today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There is also another very interesting chapter, chapter 6. It's called The Crown of Higher Order Thinking. And it's very important. This chapter is very important to me because critical thinking and problem-solving skills are very essential. Many times they're not taught in high school. They're not taught in high school. You know, teenagers need to learn to think and solve problems, make wise decisions for themselves. And that was why I decided to get this chapter. And there are some very, very powerful stories in this chapter. We had to make sure we carefully dissected all that we needed to say regarding higher order thinking. We looked at critical thinking, how to employ it in our daily experience. We looked at problem solving, how to employ it as well. And then the text ended with an African proverb which says, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. Don't raise your voice, improve your argument. And there is an important story here that I want to pick up. It's a story by Agnes Kabonesa from Uganda. So Agnes has this very beautiful story to tell. She says here, at the age of 15, my mother, together with a few clan members, married me off to a 17-year-old primary school dropout. He was an orphan and could hardly take care of himself, let alone a wife. He was dependent on his elder brother, who had given my family a cow and some money for my hand in marriage. I spent 2 years in that marriage, and those were the most miserable days of my youth. After 2 years, I decided to leave the marriage. It was one of the best decisions I made as an adolescent, but it came with a price. I was rejected by my parents, family, and relatives, yet I stood my ground. Somehow, I had hoped that something good would come out of the pain and rejection I was facing. Thereafter, I joined a community sensitization group on women's and girls' issues. We talked about issues like child marriage, girl-child education, domestic violence, and HIV/AIDS. I felt empowered as I became aware of my rights and responsibilities, and gained courage as I joined in educating the community. These paved way for my story to be published, and I got a scholarship to return to school. I volunteered as a child advocate and young leader for over 5 years, which increased my expertise in community work and widened my network. Every success comes with sacrifice. I refused to be involved in any sexual relationships until I remarried because I didn't want to risk pregnancy. I could not afford mistakes. I had a vision, and my goal was to become a university graduate and lift my family from poverty. So I became focused, determined, hardworking, resilient, and passionate about community work with clearly set objectives. I'm glad to say that I accomplished my goal. This does not mean I had a smooth ride. Actually, when I got a scholarship, Many rumors were peddled around by those who didn't like me. I was waylaid many times, but survived. I understand the fact that each individual has a unique experience, and some situations are tougher than others. Just remember that your vision, objectives, and personal values will determine how you exit that situation. Learn to be completely honest with yourself and refrain from being a people pleaser. Understand that most people will try to discourage you. Everyone told me I would never be a university graduate because obviously married girls can never abstain from sex nor study to university level. I went ahead and proved all of them wrong. I did abstain from sex and I did study to university level and graduate. Let me share my personal formula for success with you. Vision, objectives, personal goals, values, and focus plus determination, resilience, hard work, willingness to be challenged, and to challenge equals success. So that was a story by Agnes Carbonessa. So this story is very, very dear to me. And because sometimes young persons, they make mistakes in life and then they think, I've made this big mistake. I can't come out of it. Like in her case, the reason why she was married off to this guy was that she was pregnant at 15. And the family said, okay, we're going to marry you off. But she did not let that dent in her life end the road for her. Agnes is a fierce young woman. I mean, I've had the privilege to meet her. She's a very fierce young woman and very determined. And it shows that, I mean, it's a bend, not an end. If you face any challenge, it's a bend, it's not an end. And your life still remains a beautiful story to tell, regardless of whatever. But there's also a very interesting story still from chapter 6 that I want to read. And it's from Victor Ziegwe. I mean, I'm excited that this is recorded, so it's going to be on YouTube and people can read it. I'm sure you're going to see a lot of comments on it. So here is this story. When I held a book reading in, where was that? In Lagos, there was a young person who said this story spoke to him because he was at a phase in his life where it felt like, the beginning part of this story was him. So here's this story by Victor Ziegwe, who currently lives in Australia. So he says, as a youth, I found it difficult to believe in myself. I lived off the backs of others. I was easily swindled. Peer pressure pulled me into alcohol, smoking, and regular partying. My low self-confidence was so severe that even as a graduate of geology from the University of Ilorin, I was willing to work in a bar. Now, we know, a bar is where you sell drinks. A friend had just opened a bar in Lagos, and I decided to work there. That shows you where my headspace was at the time. So here is a graduate. He's a graduate, but he just had no sense of purpose and chose to work in a bar. And working in a bar in Nigeria is not like working in a bar in the US. So this bar could just be like a very local bar where you get peanuts at the end of the day. And here is a university graduate. So with this beginning part, he's trying to explain where his headspace was as a person, someone with no sense of direction at all. So he goes further with the story. That shows where my headspace was at the time. I was what Nigerians would term as follow, meaning I was more willing to trail the path of others than chart mine. A turning point for me was at a wedding I attended. An elderly man, an uncle to one of the young men seated beside me, asked the young men about the direction of their lives. Sadly, they had nothing meaningful to say. The elderly man went on to say he was going to share with them 3 things greater than money. It It's typical for a young person to expect money from someone who appears to be elderly, rich, and friendly. So this man explained that what he was going to offer wasn't money, but it had the propensity to change their lives for good. He went on to mention the three things, which were think, evaluate, and pursue. To think, you need to imagine and visualize a desired future. To evaluate, you need to look at what you have. Even if you have little, acknowledge the little you have. Then seek legal ways to use what you have to acquire what you need for your life. To pursue, you need to look at the big picture and take the first step. So those were the three things he mentioned: think, evaluate, and pursue. His words brought me to a moment of introspection. It was clear I had not achieved anything significant in my life. I remember, think. I knew I had the desire to go overseas, to create a life for myself. I visualized that future. Evaluate. I evaluated by looking at what I had and what I needed. Then I proposed to pursue my dreams. It's been more than 8 years since that eureka moment. I am so glad I made that positive decision, which built a foundation for my family and career. Some people have $1 million idea in their heads, but have the fear of implementation. Don't let fear paralyze your dreams. You have been given the ability to think and visualize. Use it. Once you are persuaded that the path you've chosen is necessary, invest in the determination and engage and the energy required into seeing the actualization of your dreams. So that's very interesting story from chapter 6 of the book. So interestingly, we have Ugochi Obidiegwu, who happens to be one of the contributors of the book. So Dr. Choti, I think I would give Ugochi time to speak, because her interesting story is in a chapter I really, really love, chapter 9, the spectacles of interdisciplinarity. So I would ask her to speak when I get to that chapter.
So I would like to say welcome, Ugochi. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, where are you joining from?
I'm joining from New York.
Oh, from New York. You're very welcome, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for contributing to the project, to Chibuzor's project, where we're enjoying the reading so far. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Chibuzor, did you want to contribute, or you just wanted to?
Yes, I think I'll go straight to chapter 9.
Okay.
Chapter 9 is called The Spectacles of Interdisciplinarity. Sounds very academic, but I wrote it in such a way that the young persons can find relevant. So here is the beginning. In 1991, architect Mike Pierce was hired to design the largest office and retail building in Harare, Zimbabwe. However, the clients didn't want to pay for the expensive air conditioning needed to cool such a large building. In order to solve this problem, Pierce turned to biomimicry. Biomimicry is the imitation of ingenuity found in natural biological designs and applying them to processes in engineering or invention to solve human problems. By studying the ventilation system of termite mounds, he gained insight into what could be done. The result was a termite-inspired cooling system for the large 7-story building that didn't require an electric-powered cooling air conditioning system. Interdisciplinarity is an approach that involves looking through a wide spectrum of knowledge or academic disciplines. This is done to deepen the learning experience in a quest to develop innovative solutions. I refer to interdisciplinarity as spectacles because it enables you clearly see portions of the solution buried in different disciplines. Furthermore, it allows you excavate from each soil and melt them together to form an alloy of unconventional solutions. For decades, innovation has been a product of design at the intersection of art, biology, and technology. In this case, knowledge in biology was fused with knowledge in engineering to create a solution in architecture. Such fusion of knowledge makes for smarter decisions and more innovative solutions. So I'm not going to go down to read. Here is the reason why I wrote this chapter. I wrote this chapter because I want young persons to see the power of blending ideas from different disciplines. And that's the root, or would I say, the springboard for innovation, because there is nothing that is originally new. It's just a blend of different ideas. And you know that even in music, some of the great musicians we have are people who have succeeded in blending sounds, getting sounds from different parts of the world, blending it, and you have something extraordinary. My brother happens to be a food technologist, and he will tell you that flavors oftentimes are a blend of, different food substances, and with that in the lab, you're able to create something really, really powerful. And I'm going to read, there are several interesting stories here, and I'm going to read Ugochi's story because the work Ugochi does in safety is a blend of different ideas. I look at Ugochi's story and I look at her work, and I can see that clearly. So Ugochi studied communications in the university. And at some point in her career, she was an air hostess. And she learned a number of things about safety. And what did she do? She came to a point where she realized that safety needs to be taught to young persons from a personal experience she had had. Before I read her story, I just wanted to create a premise for her story. And so using her art as a communications person, she was able to blend it with her skill in safety and created what is known as Safety Chick. So I'm going to read her story. How would you feel if you achieved the biggest dreams of your heart? Happy, excited, fulfilled, encouraged? As thrilling as this sounds, many people still do not achieve their dreams. This is because everyone wants to succeed, but not everyone wants to pay the price. Growth and success come with a price. Growth will involve doing the work and going outside your comfort zone to learn. In 2016, I started a social enterprise, the Safety Chick, in Nigeria, to reduce the occurrence of avoidable accidents in our society. It bothered me that people would sustain injuries or die when they could be alive and in good health just by making safe choices. However, good intentions without a specific strategy to do the work left me unable to reach my target audience. I didn't know anything about running a business, so I decided to work with coaches and take some courses in order to learn. I wanted to build a business that would make an impact in society. Every time I learned something new, I practiced it in my business immediately. That's how I discovered what would differentiate us from other businesses in the safety industry. We began creating African-inspired characters in African contexts for our entertaining and educative products and programs. This became a hallmark of our enterprise and caused us to stand out quickly. Before long, our work began to get recognition in both local and foreign media. So far, we have received grants and collaborated with local and foreign organizations. Our work was recommended as good practice for other countries by the European Network for Education and Training in Occupational Safety and Health. Yet, it all started from an idea to solve a problem in society. If you want to grow, do big stuff, and make your impact in society, you must take ownership of your learning process. You must be bold to admit that you do not know enough for that big thing you are trying to achieve. You must be humble and willing to learn. Furthermore, you must be courageous to implement what you are learning, even when people around you do not understand. You must have the audacity to grow and shatter records. To a large extent, your growth is in your hands. Rise up and begin to do it. So that ends the story of Ugochi Obidiegwu under the chapter, The Spectacles of Interdisciplinarity. And it ends with an African proverb that says, wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it. The baobab tree is very large. So no one individual can embrace all of it. So you will need someone else and another person to form a full embrace. And what does that mean? We can get ideas from here, from here, from here, from here to build something incredible. And so Dr. Choti, I don't know if you have something to say. I believe Ugochi has something to say in response to her story.
I do think, yes, we'll give Ugochi a chance, and then I encourage anyone else who has a question, a comment in the audience to also chip in, because we want to make this an interactive discussion. I mean, I'm not trying to say that if you have nothing to say, you make something up, but feel free to contribute. So Ugochi, please welcome, and that's a very wonderful story.
Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much, Chibuzor, for allowing me to share my story in your book. Thank you, Dr. Choti, for hosting this session at the school. So I think that this story is actually very important for all of us, because at different points in our life, we're going to get to a point where to move from where we are to the next level, we have to decide. I always ask this question: would you rather remain the head girl in primary 5? So head girl in Nigeria is like a school prefect. So would you rather remain the head girl in primary 5 or become the VC of an international university? so for every one of us, we're going to get to a point in our lives where what we're doing is okay, but to get to the next level, we have to almost start from scratch. We have to relearn new things. We have to be willing to expand our skill set, expand our capacity. Are we willing to do it, or would we shy away from that responsibility and just stay in our own cocoon? Okay, no, this is familiarity. This is what I know. Now, if we really want to stretch and move to the next level, then we must understand that what brought us to where we are now is not enough, and enough to take us to where we are going to. And that takes some humility, sobering, to know that, oh my God, you have to go back to school. Like currently, I'm back in school for my graduate program at New York University because I need to learn new things for where I am going to. So we've got to be willing to do the hard work. There will be times when there is some sort of silence, or it seems like you're being pushed back, but it's because when you need to propel an arrow, the arrow is going to be drawn backwards, so that when it is released, it can go further and further. But you can't just shoot an arrow without pulling it backwards. And so we shouldn't look at our seasons of training, learning, doing new things as, oh, I'm not moving as I should. We should look at it as boosting and increasing our capacity so that we can really become that person that we're supposed to be. And yeah, that's what I have to say. So any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ugochi. So I have a question, or maybe I'll ask you, would you share more about what these safety checks are?
Okay, so it's a child safety social enterprise. We create safety education products. So either it's an actual physical product or a training service that equips children and educators on how to stay safe in different situations. So that we're raising safety consciousness, and then we're also preventing avoidable accidents. So we have storybooks. It actually started as just visiting schools and training the children. And then we saw that if we trained and we left, there was nothing that they could hold on to. And so we wrote a book, currently 3 books in the series. It's also available on Amazon and on the business's website. And then the pandemic now made us to see that, okay, it's great that there is a book, but what happens if for some reason the book is not able to reach people in certain areas? What else can be done? And so one of the things we worked on this year is making it into a game app. And the advantage of the game app is that we're able to keep on adding more modules, more topics as the case, as different topics come up. So we leverage storytelling. We use African-inspired characters. We use lots of puzzles, coloring activities, just a fun way to teach the children so that they remember what they are being taught. Because sometimes safety might seem like a very complex topic, but using stories, using simple form makes it easy for the children to understand. Then for the educators, we train them because we know that there is some advantage to teaching the children. But if our educators do not know enough to create safe learning spaces for children, it's also a problem. And so we equip them with knowledge on how to ensure that their learning environment, the schools are safe, and so that they too know how to act in different kinds of emergencies. And there's also the component of providing policy advisory, where we share with government agencies, on how to structure activities to ensure that the knowledge cascades from the top to the bottom. Because doing it at the level of just the schools, the children is great, but if you really want it to spread across the entire country, or even to other countries, then we must look at the policy angle, so that information spreads as it should.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for all the details and again for sharing your success story. All right, back to the audience. Anyone with a question or a comment so far for Chibuzor or for the contributors?
Thank you, Chibuzor, for this chapter again. Thank you, Ugochi. I think one thing I would like to chip in is just based on my own observation. I think I found out even the last several years that knowledge, I think knowledge is not very appreciated. I think that could be some kind of drawback for people to learn new things. Like we're at a point in our lives where interdisciplinary learning and things like that is just is very eminent. It's very important. But I think a lot of youths coming up, they're very focused on just making money. And I think they don't have or the understanding of how to get there. The idea of knowledge is power is no more as it used to be or as it's supposed to be preached. So I think that could be causing some kind of barriers in for example, it might be easier for someone to binge on a series for like, I don't know, maybe cumulatively 48 hours than to take a class that just, an online class that lasts 4 hours. It's just because of the mindset of there's nothing really exciting or cool to learn this new thing. What am I going to use it for? What is the dollar or naira or other currency equivalent is that? What is it worth? So I think that is one thing we have to go back to, that kind of sensitization of letting people know that sometimes location is important, but sometimes your vocation is more important. So I think it's just I think it's more like a mindset. Just getting to know this is important. I need to know it for myself. I might not make money today. I might not make recognition today, but it will help me someday. It will help someone else. And sometimes the way I look at it is, if I learn this, if I make the purpose of learning it bigger than myself, then it makes it easier for me to learn. Because if I think about it, it is just to an additional X amount of naira or dollar or pound more in my salary. For me, it doesn't push me as much as this might help some people in certain parts of the world, or this might help some other staff get through with this work. It kind of helps me to learn more and just be inquisitive and just be disciplined about trying to learn. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Great point, Omeza. Thank you so much for all the contributions you've been making. They're wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else? Before we give it back to Chibuzor. Welcome, Vivian. Doesn't seem like.
Yeah, is that Vivian Anso?
Yes, it is. Hello, Chibuzor.
Oh. Yes, this is Vivian Anso. Okay, so Dr. Choti, let me do a short introduction of Madam Anso. Madam Anso happens to be the editor of this book. I owe her a lot of commendation for helping me and being very patient. She stretched me as though I was working on a PhD thesis. She would send me messages at 1 a.m., 6 a.m., and I would ask, does this woman sleep? She would say, oh, we need reference for this statement. We need this. You need to verify this. Does this, I'm critiquing this, you know? And of course, you know, you need people like this to be able to create something like this, because, you know, this is something that you want young people everywhere to read, and you can't just throw anything there. It can be contested, you know. So, and then there were moments where I felt, you know what, I think I have other things to do. Maybe I need to leave the manuscript. And then she would be the one to encourage me. We are just, don't worry, we are still on the timeline. And at least help, you know, her consistency helped me to be very, very accountable to the contributors. And I have so much thanks to, you know, to give to her for really supporting, you know. So I think she might want to tell us why she chose to, because she's a very busy woman. She's a trauma coach, she's a lawyer, she's a professional editor, she does everything. I was even thinking, how is this woman going to finish my work in this life? And that she was able to even find time, that was something. So Dr. Choti, maybe you would ask her why she decided to come on this project.
So Vivian, why did you decide to participate in Chibuzor's project?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Dr. Choti.
Hello.
Yeah, well, you know, Chibuzor keeps saying, oh, you did such you know, I guess I feel that the encomiums are not really warranted, because I felt that this was a project that I just had to be a part of. Much of the work I do is with women and young people, and just going through the manuscript, and especially when I began to read the stories of the contributors, I felt, wow, this work has to go out there. So I felt that it was such a privilege for me to be a part of this project, and to be able to birth this book and make it available to young people all over the world. I was especially excited because the stories were African stories. I feel like our stories need to be heard. And so for me, it was a privilege on my part, but also I felt that this is a book that is really, really needed. And it's just a joy to be a part of bringing it out there.
Wow. That's a great answer. I would say the same thing. If I was in your shoes, if I was asked why, then I think I probably will give the exact same answer, because it's the message, it's the passion that Chibuzor had, plus the contributors in having this project put together. So Thank you so much for helping. We wouldn't be here too if you maybe didn't recognize the importance of having the book out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So
we don't want to close
chapter.
anyone out. If you have a question, please, if you have a comment, go ahead. You can raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and let us know that you want to contribute. So go ahead, Chibuzor.
So the last chapter in the book is chapter 10. I had to skip chapter 7 and chapter 8. Chapter 7 is the belt of collaboration. Chapter 8 is the helmet of entrepreneurial thinking. I had to skip them. We've done chapter 9. So chapter 10 is very important, and I purposefully placed it at 10 because of the nature of the chapter. It's called The Accessories of Inclusiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has a quote by me. It says, "We see you, we respect you, we value your unique contribution, and we want you seated with us at the table." That is what inclusion looks like. And in the world we live, this is a message that needs to be echoed more and more, because representation is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
And people talk about it, but they don't practice it. It sounds something that's politically correct, but they don't take it really serious. You know, interestingly, I would be at MSU at the International Center, Global Youth Advancement Network. And I'm glad that Luna Lee agreed to a book tour. I was to do a book reading with Peace Quest, but I learned the coordinator had COVID. Yeah. So we would have a virtual engagement, but there are a number of activities we'll have to do. And chapter 10 is something I really want to stress on, because people talk about inclusion. Oh, it's great. Include, let's have people of color. Let's have this, let's have that. But when the cameras are not there, it's a different experience.
Yes.
So I begin this chapter by saying, because I call it the accessories of inclusiveness. Accessories enhance the beauty of an attire. Every piece adds to the grandeur of the entire look. So it is with building a winning team. Our differences as individual human beings are actually an advantage. The ability to respect and leverage on this unique advantage for mutual benefit is what we will be looking at in this chapter. The premise of inclusivity is difference. We must learn to appreciate the reality of each person's individuality, rather than create an atmosphere of rivalry against the thing which makes us different. Wisdom is leveraging on this difference as an added boon for progress. We cannot all be the same, and we do not need to be. It's often said that variety is the spice of life, but many times people turn a blind eye to respecting this variety in our social engagements. Tribalism, racism, sexism, prejudice, and bigotry are sadly still practiced by some individuals who claim to be educated and exposed. It's wrong to frustrate someone because they are of a different gender. In the same vein, you shouldn't hate someone just because they are of a certain ethnicity. Doing so indicates that you are operating under a false assumption that every single person from that tribe is evil, which is preposterous. Such error has nothing to do with the individual hated. It has everything to do with the thinking of the individual projecting it. The bottom line is that this thinking is flawed and has to be corrected. We must break free from the burden of false narratives and stereotypes passed down to us from generations before us. People should be judged by their character and competence, and not by their ethnicity, race, religion, and the like. Inclusiveness in the workplace is the practice or policy of including people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. The world is evolving rapidly, yet we are not embracing inclusion at the same pace. We are all different, and our differences can generate various views and contribute to creativity and innovation. We've made much progress as mankind, and we can go even further by utilizing our differences to better achieve our goals and objectives. This is why embracing diverse talent is so important. Valuing each member of your team and providing inclusive leadership should be a priority. So I am going to jump that and go to a very important story. There are two stories in chapter 10. So I'm going to read a story by Georgina Chikekela from Angola. So she talks about her experience as a woman working in this oil company and how she's treated differently. So she says, I work in a multinational oil and gas company. Not long ago, during the annual appraisal, one of my former supervisors was not ethical or respectful during the evaluation. He used my husband and children as criteria to evaluate my professional performance. I found his approach to be misogynistic and disrespectful to my family. As I sat there listening to him, I remember several thoughts going through my mind, which includes, is this normal? Am I crazy? Or is this person? Okay, let me read this again. Is this normal? Am I crazy? Or this person doesn't deserve to be a supervisor? Is this a call for me to stop and evaluate if I am in the correct place? Do I want to work in an organization that does not value women as human beings and professionals? When the call ended, I broke down and cried. Nevertheless, I went on and made concerted efforts to accomplish not only my annual goals, but also the entire annual work. It was a very challenging year for me at work. To this day, this is one incident that I think of almost every workday. It certainly was the worst experience of my life. And to give context to this, she was pregnant with her second child when this happened. And so the supervisor had said something that he wouldn't have said if she were a man. So it was like using the, what would I call it? Those things that are associated with her being a woman, being a mother, being pregnant, and like, making light of those experiences just because you want to pass a message of you have not met your annual appraisal. And then he had to take the low road. So I go on with the story. When I spoke with my husband, he said, I will support you in whatever you decide to do. Thereafter, I decided on the steps I would take. 1, write the feedback of my supervisor in the company system, so it would be on record. 2, share the incident with the ethics entity. My aim was that the person concerned would at least hear that the behavior was erroneous and unacceptable. Supervisors should not evaluate team members based on gender, but based on professional development and output. 3, stand up for myself. One of my values is respect, regardless of the situation and context. I would never use my position to intimidate others. I also proposed that I would not allow myself to be intimidated. During this process, I have discovered and embraced some very interesting values, Some of the important messages I would like to reinforce are: 1, do not discriminate. 2, be respectful. 3, follow the rules. 4, listen to others. 5, be honest, develop integrity. 6, believe in yourself. And 7, stand up for yourself. Stand up for what you believe. When you learn to stand for yourself, you also develop the courage to stand up for others. Discover, pursue, and embrace your values. And in the end, you will be at peace with yourself. So that's the last story in the book, Rising at Sunrise. And it ends with this African quote. Let me get it. It ends with this African quote: until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter.
Wow. That is very powerful. Like, this session in general has been very, very powerful. There's power in stories.
Yeah.
I believe in that. There's power in stories because it's lived experiences of people. And you can't discount that. You can't discount a lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
The most you can do is to learn from it. So it's time, it's about 9 minutes, and we are headed to wrapping up the session. And before I start giving my thanks, I'm opening it up again to our audience. In case anybody has something to say, something to ask, please, this is the time. And then we can, thank you, Anita, I see you, so great job, Chibuzor, wonderful. Thanks, Anita.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Choti. Hello, everyone. Thank you again, Chibuzor. I was listening. I had wanted to make a contribution much earlier, but then I just said, okay, let me listen. And it's like you saving the best for the last, honestly, because this last chapter sums up experiences that most of us either directly or indirectly have encountered. And in fact, the stories you read through, the experiences you narrated, they have all in one way or the other touched some of us, I am sure. And to you again, Dr. Choti, the recounting of your daughter's experience was another mind-blowing one. And I just felt like saying this. Most of the time we say things we either are not committed to or we do not quite believe in. Because, for instance, I can relate to the fact that we talk about diversity, we talk about equity, and we talk about inclusion. But to what extent are these really practiced? Especially the point when you said, when the cameras are turned off, when the Zoom discussion ends, when there is no other person watching, what personal experiences do we get? What lessons do we learn from this? But again, it is a blessing in disguise because hearing these stories empower us. They strengthen us for the challenges ahead. And if somebody says no to you, of course, that does not mean you're going to say no to yourself. If you believe in yourself, you know what you can do, you know what you stand for, the values you hold, you ought to fight for them, you ought to believe in them. So I just want to thank you. I just want to appreciate the fact that you have brought all these stories together. I can't wait to lay my hands on this book, honestly, because it's so powerful listening to these stories. And as an African woman based here in the US, I know some of the challenges that we face, especially as colored people. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Dr. Choti.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Anita, for that contribution. I definitely know that lives are going to be touched or have been touched by these stories in a way that will push them forward, will encourage them to see life in a different way because somebody else has gone through the experience and has paved way for others, and even as shared an encouragement for somebody who is older. You know, sometimes we feel like, oh, it's younger people who are supposed to get these messages or they're supposed to learn from these experiences. No, it's everybody. As Omeza said, if you're a parent, then you have a child to raise. And if you're raising a child, you're raising them in this world, the world that we're talking about that needs all these like that not that knows, but the life that has all these challenging experiences that we're talking about, from the family, from outside the family, from everywhere. So it's for everybody. Actually, I really believe that these stories, the education that we're getting from these stories will be impactful to anyone, will be useful to anyone that will get a hold of this book. So to end this, I want to say thank you so much, Chibuzor, for accepting to be part of the African Tea Time. This is what we do here. We come here in these sessions. They used to be in person, but now we do them virtually since 2020. We might want to start doing some type of hybrid in person, because here at Michigan State University or within the African Studies Center, we value community so much. We'd love to see faces if possible. We love to just build that community of support. So we will be trying to come back to in person, but some of this will continue being virtual, because we want to include as many people as possible. Because you can imagine, before COVID, even institutions, big or small, they never thought that we can have connections like this through Zoom, through different virtual platforms. But now it has become a thing and a useful tool actually to connect with people from different parts of the world. I'm sure we were not going to have Vivian or Ugochi or Anita. Yeah, we were not going to have them contribute here in this discussion, but being online has made it possible. So I really want to say thank you so very much. Your project is powerful, and we also want to say thank you to the contributors wherever they are, those who are able to join us here, those who are not here, and we insist and maintain that. Thank you for sharing your stories, some of them being putting yourself in a vulnerable spot for the sake of helping others to learn and to be in a better place than where you were when these experiences were happening. So I would like to end it here, but before I do, I will give you, Chibuzor, time to give your concluding remarks, and then we can say bye-bye and look forward to seeing you on the 22nd for the next African Tea Time, for those who are here in person, and we'll try to live stream it. So we'll share all that information. So Chibuzor, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Choti. I'm truly grateful for the time. Those of you in Michigan State University, I will be at Michigan State University on Monday, and I intend to spend the entire week there for a book tour, thanks to the International Center at Michigan State University. So I'll come with a few copies, but I'm going to come with copies for the African Studies Center, and as well as the Global Youth Advancement Network. I'm going to come with copies for them. But in case it doesn't get to you, you could get copies on Amazon. And the interesting thing about it is that proceeds from the book are reinvested into the book to help us print more copies to donate freely to young persons. So that's one way you can help us ensure that this book gets to more young persons. You could buy some copies for a school library. You know, like for example, here in Detroit, there is a library that, a school library that will be getting copies. So if you feel it's necessary to make sure that young persons get more copies of this book, you could order on Amazon, and I'll be glad that you contributed towards this project. So I want to thank everyone. I also want to thank the contributors for coming at late minutes, for responding despite their busy schedule. I'm grateful that this video will be up on YouTube so that more young persons can benefit from all that has been discussed in this session. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Choti.
All right. Thank you so much, Chibuzor, and thanks again to everyone that made time to be here with us and to be here until the end. We look forward to seeing you again, and please feel free to reach out to the African Studies Center, to reach out to me if you have questions about the African Tea Time or any other programming with the Michigan State University African Studies Center. So bye-bye and hope to see you next time.
Bye-bye.